Hi everyone, I'm posting this online because a lot of people have questions on working for the Big Four, getting hired, like the interview process, and I just wanted to go over that from my perspective. My perspective might be a little bit different than most, so I'll give you a little bit of background. I'm an IT guy, IT professional, do network security, so I have to approach this from the IT side where a lot of folks it seem that get hired by the Big Four. Sorry, my cat's in the way. Uh, do mostly like accounting, tax audit, internal services, and things of that nature. So bear in mind when you listen to this, um, I applied doing IT work, doing IT audit, IT risk assessments, things of that nature. Um, so keep in mind that that's how I'm going to approach this, and hopefully it'll still help you out, even if you're in the non like tech side, doing consulting work or things of that nature. So I first applied actually out of the blue. I'm a professional. I'm 38, so I wasn't like a college hire. But I just went on their website and actually just applied for the job. It was a Sunday. I was actually eating dinner in front of my computer, just trying to get some stuff done, getting caught up for the week. Just applied out of the blue, for a couple jobs that I thought I my skills closely matched. I applied for a manager position and a senior associate position, and literally the next day, I got an email right around lunchtime. I want to say, from a recruiter saying, "Hey, reviewed your resume, completely interested in speaking with you about the position you applied for." Um, and the key word there is position because I actually applied for multiple. So when I finally spoke to him, actually the next day or the day after, it was a great conversation. Total pleasure doing business with. I'm about a month into working for the firm, so spoken to him a couple times. He's actually working with a couple of my friends, hopefully getting them on board. Great pleasure to do business with. I think he's a fair and level-headed guy, and I think from my perspective, from what I know now, he was pretty upfront about everything. Um, so I told him what jobs I applied for because he only mentioned one in particular, and me coming predominantly from government work, um, it was interesting that what he was interviewing and reviewing me for was actually public sector work, not any of my government experience, which I found was odd because they do a fair amount of government work. Um, and again, if I haven't said this, this firm is PricewaterhouseCoopers. And they do a decent amount of government work, if not for some contract work that does support the government. So we talked on the phone for about an hour. So a pretty good conversation, total upbeat, great pleasure. It answered all the questions I had about the company. Uh, couldn't answer so much about the job. He could speak to it, but that would kind of come down the line with my interview process. Um, I think he was up front. Like I said, I applied for a manager position and a senior associate position. He kind of talked me down from the manager position only because I don't have a lot of commercial work. I have about 21, 22 years of experience, and it's almost all government contracting work or civil service. Um, and he thought it would be best for me to start at the senior associate position, put in a year, maybe two, and get bumped up. And I feel pretty confident that that can still happen because I've spoken with a couple folks, um, when I went to my initial onboarding, which I'll make another video about that actually are doing what I'm doing. Um, and some folks that work there that followed my same path and they had no issues. And the recruiter boiled it down to with your education, life experience, and we'll say age. There's things that maybe someone fresh out of grad school or 2 or 3 years into the workforce that they just might not have their hands around difficult, situations working with clients and things of that nature. Not that they can't, but if they're, let's say, late 20s and I'm late 30s, there's a lot to say for 10 years of of experience, and I've done everything from IT work on UAVs to help desk work. So my experience is kind of across the board. Not so deep, because it seems like every 2 years it carries me in a different direction, but it's wide across the board. So I decided to push ahead with the senior associate position, vice the manager position, and go that route. So about a week later, he contacted me to set up an interview, and it was supposed to be through HireVue, which is a VTC kind of thing where you see the person you're interviewing with, and you get to interact and so forth. So here I am sitting in front of my computer screen, like waiting, and it's about 15 minutes past the interview time, and my cell phone rings, and I'm like, well, do I answer it? Do I not answer it? And I didn't, because I didn't know who the call was, but I just didn't want to get pulled off the call, or pulled off this thing, this HireVue. So I actually called that number back, and it was actually the person I was supposed to be interviewing with, and lo and behold, he had just gotten off a plane, actually overseas. So we ended up doing actually the first interview over the phone. Great pleasure. He was super upfront. In the IT world, he asked me questions pretty technical, just based upon what methodologies I knew in the IT sector, like Agile, CMMI, ISO, NIST, and different frameworks, and how I've been able to apply them to different organizations. The interview lasted about 40 minutes. Wasn't a lot of questions, but it was a lot of banter back and forth, life experience wise. Once you got past like the initial questions that he wanted to ask for my resume, he asked me to explain a couple things for my resume, but nothing that haven't expected. I actually expected a lot more technical. From the research I did online, I was expecting a lot of technical questions, and then like the next interview being more personality based. And that wasn't the case. Maybe 3 or 4 technical questions, along with certain situations that I've been in the IT world, people and contracts that I've managed, and things of that nature. But nothing too outlandish that I thought was crazy. About 2 or 3 days later, the recruiter called me back and said, "Hey, interview went well. You're going to move on to the next stage." So it was about another week before I had another interview set up. Again, it was one of the other directors, or actually, I think, a director, and maybe even managing director, and great, a little bit more personality driven, asking me about complex situations, how would I feel and handle certain situations, but nothing that I thought that was crazy. I thought it was pretty, straightforward. How would you handle an unethical client? How would you handle an unethical employee? And she was a lawyer background, dealing with technology stuff like copyright and stuff. So she, of course, I did some research, and once I knew that, I kind of expected those kind of questions from her from just looking online, which I did once I found out every person I was interviewing with, just a real quick glance at LinkedIn, and things of that nature. But nothing was really that I saw was too outlandish in that video, or in that interview. Again, a couple days later, the recruiter said it went fine, and then he said I was going to move on to the next phase, or the next phase, interview, stage, whatever you want to call it. And this was going to be a partner interview. And from my research online, I found that it usually goes, a director within the region where you're going to be working with. I live in San Diego. A director outside that region that you may work with and cross paths with. And then usually a partner in that region. And this was actually the first interview with a partner where I actually was a little bit taken back a little bit. The very first question was, "Hey, I get your salary requirements and you don't know if we're going to be able to make it work." and this was the first time salary's ever been mentioned other than talking with the recruiter. And so right away, that was the very first one, and I was like, oh, this is the first time it had been mentioned. So I definitely put my phone on mute while I was sitting there, took a deep breath, took it off mute, and just re-engaged. And my comment back to him was, well, we're both working at risk here. And by that I meant he's taking a risk by hiring me, and I'm taking a risk by leaving a great, comfy job that I've had for numerous years to take a risk in working for a new career field. But I'm kind of a risk taker, so I didn't mind. And I think that was a decent icebreaker because you could hear him kind of, I don't want to say set back in his chair, but he was like, okay, I see where you're coming from. I see that point of view. And we got to talking back and forth, and it was more along the lines of the questions that I had just been asked from the other director. So not really technical, mostly personality based, but more broad. How do you feel about travel? Is there any clients you've had difficulties with managing? Is there any type of work that you don't want to do? Or industries you don't want to work in? Because they work across the board. Anything from banking to cars to aerospace. And the same thing, it was about a 40-minute interview, 40 minutes. Excuse me. And it wasn't that bad once I got past that initial hump. Once the interview was over, thanked him for his time, appreciated it, asked him what the next steps were, because this has already been pushing like the 5-week mark. And it was in the middle of summer, so now we're late summer, we're like late July, August, and I know how things get once you're close to the holidays. Even though we're a couple months away, say it takes me another month to get an offer letter, well, now we're into late September, and I had almost 300 hours of vacation with my last company, and my plan was just to stay on vacation, so that way I'd have health benefits, and in essence, I could take like a month off and still get paid instead of cashing out vacation and then rolling right into the next job. So I was kind of starting to think about that. And this was probably, we're probably into like mid to late August by this point. He said he had no issues, that all the interviews that they had, they were going to roundtable the discussion for each person and then provide us feedback. And about a week and a half later, the recruiter called me. Hey, it went well. They want to do one in-person interview, maybe two, here in the local San Diego office. Now, keep in mind, to this point, it's all been over the phone. So I went into the office, met with one of the folks that does IT consulting in the health profession sector. So dealing with, Kaiser's, Sharp, Affirma, things of that nature. And what I found out after this interview that I can share now is that they needed a lot of people, like 6 to 8 people they were trying to hire by year's end. And I was going to be the first one they brought on within like 2 or 3 months. And they were trying to figure out where to put me based upon where the fire was. In essence, what projects were they super short-manned with, and where they could use me the most, get me in the quickest and use me the most with like the least amount of learning curve. So I met with him, great guy. It was on a Wednesday, and he was actually like, yeah, this is the first time I've been in this office in like a month. And I can talk a little bit about that, probably maybe in the next video, about getting hired or after, what to expect once you get hired. It was total great. Again, couple technical questions, but it's more methodology based. If you were going to go work at a hospital and review do some audits for their IT work, what things would you look at? Okay, are they following HIPAA? Do they have training plans? Do they have disaster recovery procedures? Do they have policies? Because the biggest thing is if you're going to hold like an employee to the fire, do you have a policy that everyone's supposed to follow? So I brought this up, and And it was a quick interview, maybe 30 minutes. And once I left there, literally my phone rang, and it was the recruiter. He's like, "Hey, the first gentleman you interviewed with wants to have lunch with you tomorrow. Do you have time?" And I was like, "Okay." Um, and he actually emailed me later that day, and he's like, "Hey, looks like the interview you had today went well. So, have fun tomorrow on your lunch." And I was like, "Have fun tomorrow on my lunch? Like, what's the hell's going on here?" Because it had already been. Now we're like, we're late August here. Maybe the first week of September. I think late August though. So I had interview or lunch with the other gentleman the next day, and it was really good. It wasn't too bad. Um, it was just like lunch, and it was like a 2-hour lunch, which I was kind of shocked because I didn't mention up at this point, but every person I talked to was always seemed super busy. "Hey, I'm just coming out of a meeting. I have 20 minutes to talk to you. I'm going into another meeting." Every person said this. It was, except for the first interview I had where I was in person. He wasn't so rushed, but he ended it saying, "Hey, I have a call in a couple minutes I got to prepare for." But it wasn't, every person before that, they weren't like pushy or they weren't rude, but that you could definitely tell they had urgency and a purpose with what they were doing. So we had lunch. It was great. Almost the same exact questions he asked me before. What methodologies have I worked with? What work am I doing now? Why do I want to move? A little more personal stuff. But it wasn't bad. It was like an hour and a half, 2-hour lunch. And I left from there, and then for a week I didn't get a call. And I was kind of worried about that. But then the recruiter called me. He's like, "Hey, I have one last person that wants to talk to you." And I was like, "Okay, it's been this long. It's been almost 2 months. What could happen now?" And I had another interview with the second person. I had an interview with a lawyer. And she actually came right out with it. She's like, "Hey, my only concern is at your job now you said about 20, 25 people. The chances are when you come into this job at your level, you're probably only going to manage maybe 2 to 4 per project. But once you move up to the next level, you could have, maybe 4, 6, 8, 10 folks working for you." And I said, I see how that could be a concern, but keep in mind, I'm leaving an industry that I've been in for 20 years. I'm coming over to your industry. So if I'm not managing people, like I have to manage myself. That's an aspect a lot of people don't think. Is they think, oh, you can go from A to B and it's going to be easy. But when you're learning a new culture, when you're learning a new, not really a job, but a new way people do things, you have to manage yourself and your own expectations. Because it's a new job. Majority of the time when you start a new job, you're going to be working long hours because you want to make that first initial impression and you want to learn what you need to learn to get going, to contribute, to add value to that company. Because companies hire you because they're going to pay you whatever, but the value they expect to get is higher than whatever. So, for instance, if some company's going to pay you 50 grand, they hopefully can get more than 50 grand worth of work from you because that's the name of the game. So, and once I said that, she started laughing. She's like, that's perfect. I no one's ever said that. That was a really good, response. And I really wanted to bring you on board anyway, but I didn't want to dash your hopes of, managing 50 people. And nor do I want to manage 50 people right now. I mean, maybe down the road, maybe once I learn more about functions and meet some people and network within the company, I'll be there. And then that interview went well. It was really quick, maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So then the recruiter called me about a week later, and now we're like the very last part of August, like the last couple of days, the first part of September. And as I mentioned before, like, now the issue becomes is if I want to take a month off, if I don't get an offer letter, now we're talking October, Maybe it takes another week or two. Now we're in maybe November. And when I had so much vacation, with my other company, I wanted a month off. And I was starting to study for a couple certifications at the time. And now I was worried, well, if I want to take a month off and study for this, now I need like 6 weeks. Now I need like 8 weeks. And then sure enough, like the next week we started negotiating salary, and then that took like almost a full day. It actually came back no, and then I was like, all right, well, we got to do something here. And they ended up giving me like a sign-on bonus to kind of get me closer to where I wanted to be. And once we verbally agreed upon that, it was this was like a Tuesday. I think it was the Thursday before I got my offer letter. And I had to sign it within like 24 hours. So I finally sent that back. And then he called me the next week and he's like, all right, well, when do you want to start? And I'm like, all right, now we're like the first or second week of September. I wanted to take 30 days off. Now we're into October, plus 2 weeks I needed to study. Actually, I take that back. It was right around 10, 11, 12 of September because it was going to help some of my friends do a cookout the weekend before they were doing a ceremony on September 11th. So this is like September 9th, 10th, 11th. And my first thing I was like, I don't know, Thanksgiving? Because I wanted to ask for more and have him come back. And he was like, well, how about 2 weeks? I'm like, no. I'm like, I want a couple weeks off. I'm studying for these certifications. This is what I need. And so finally we agreed on the second of November, which was changed to the 1st because I had to fly out to their indoctrination, which I'm going to make another video about. So then he goes, all right, let me see what I can do. So even though I already had an offer letter, like we still had to negotiate now a start date, which was out of his control from what he told me. And that was like another week that he came back and he's like, oh, I forgot to say, I originally said the week of Thanksgiving, which is an option because they start every 2 weeks. And he came back and he's like, how about a month? And I'm like, I can't because this is what I want to do. And I had a heart-to-heart with him. I'm like, look, here's what I want to do. I need a couple of weeks off. I haven't had a vacation in a while. It's been like 2 years. And I want to study for the certification, which is going to add value to the company. And this is what I'm hoping to do. And he called me the next day. He's like, okay, that's fine. You're going to start November 2nd. And went from there. After that, things happened, I don't want to say quickly, it was about the same speed. The next week I had forms to sign. The week after that, you have to go through what they call independence, which at my level wasn't too bad. But if anything popped up on your background check, they had questions about, and I switched states of residence, and they had a question about that. Hey, why did you go from here to here? And my job transferred me. So it was a really easy explanation. But I also teach skydiving and scuba diving on the weekends, and that was an issue for them because they thought I did it during the week, like as my day job, when I don't. So I had to make a written statement for that. Excuse me. So I think that took about a week and a half to get approved. But I really didn't get like approved and everything settled until about a week and a half before my start date. So here it is like late October and I get plane tickets and then I get a hotel confirmation. And the next week I get my employee packet in the mail to bring with me on my first day at work. So, I mean, it was a long process. I think my first interview was July 3rd and I didn't start until November 1st. But even if I would have told them 2 weeks, I don't know that they could have met that. I think I would have been doing a lot of the paperwork after the fact. Of starting. But all in all, I think it was a good process. It's a long process, so don't expect it to take a couple days. When I went to their indoctrination in Georgia, everyone I spoke to was the same process. 6 to 10 week start to finish process. There was only one person that I knew that only had one interview, and she got her offer letter about 2 weeks later. But she had been working with that client for like 3 or 4 years, and that person went from private to public, in essence, went from running their own company to being bought by PWC. So, I mean, I think that was a special case. But everyone I talked to seemed to take like 6 to 10 weeks from start to finish for the process. So I think I would expect that. I think their new hire, out of college could be a little bit more expeditious than that, a little more quick. But I would still suspect that it's not going to be, you know, interview one day, interview the next day, boom, offer letter. I did speak to one person there that had 3 interviews in one day and got their offer letter about 3-4 weeks later after another interview, and then didn't get everything finalized with their offer letter and start date for another couple weeks. So I don't think I'm too far off with saying like a minimum 6 weeks. Trying to think of anything last. No, again, nothing surprising. Again, I was on the IT side, so approach it from that. Whereas if you're doing tax or CPA or some kind of finance, it might be a little bit different than that. But even the tax folks that I spoke to there had the same length of time, but on occasions a different process. They seem to do a lot of board interviews where 2 or 3 people would be in your interview at once, and mine were all separate. So either way, I hope you find this valuable. I'm going to do another video on what the first week is like, because it's a little bit different than other organizations that I've worked with. I actually had to fly to Georgia for 3 or 4 days to do their onboarding program. But I hope you find this valuable. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Hopefully by the time you see this, I'm still working there, doing great things. So far, I think it's a good company. Definitely think it was worth the time, effort, and energy I put into it. And everyone so far and along the way has totally been supportive. I've met all of them now, had lunch with all of them on separate occasions, and they're all, rock stars in my book. So anyway, again, if you have any questions, let me know, and talk to you guys soon. Thanks. Bye.